I felt that intense loneliness. I felt like the only person in the world who had a cleft, even though I knew I wasn't alone, still felt that way. All I knew was I was born like this, but I always felt like there was something wrong with me. And I didn't know that it was okay to feel the way I did, and that it was okay to feel ashamed, but that it wasn't anything to be ashamed of. Okay, this is the hand I was dealt, and this is what I made of it, and I'm very proud of who I became today because of what I overcame and what I've learned. And it wasn't easy, but I made it through, and I've learned so much from it, and I'm just grateful that I have that to give back now.
Welcome to The Human Experience. I'm Jennifer Peterkin, and this is episode 32, Christine's story. Christine was born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate. Though she's known no other reality, Christine is not immune to the difficulty, both physical and emotional, that a facial difference can present. Having endured more than 20 surgeries, while also dealing with the social and emotional ramifications of bilateral cleft lip and palate, Christine is the definition of a fighter. She fought for her agency, her career, and now she fights for others with facial differences. Through the nonprofit organization Smile Train, Christine has made it her mission to be a part of bringing awareness and resources to the cleft lip and palate community. So, Christine, do you want to jump right in? You were born.
Yes.
and that's where your story starts.
Yes. Well, what would you like to know about me? What questions do you have now that we've met in person?
So, as obvious as it may seem, I kind of like to approach things as if somebody may have never heard of it before. So you were born with a bilateral cleft. Is it palate or lip?
Both. It's a bilateral cleft lip and palate.
Cleft lip and palate. What does that mean?
Okay, that's a great question. So what it basically means is that the lip and the palate never properly formed when I was being developed in the womb. So not to get too scientific, but when the fetus is developed, we start out as two separate halves, and then we form together to be a whole half. Yeah. So the two sides of the face come together during somewhere around week 8 or 10, if I remember correctly, and that's why you have a little divot just under your nose. Oh. Well, for me or for someone with a cleft lip, that lip never properly closes and seals together, and it remains open. Mm-hmm. Bilateral means both sides, where the nostrils are, as you can see from my scars. Unilateral, which is another form, is only one side of the lip, and then the palate is where the palate doesn't properly close, and so my palate was wide open into the airway in my nose. So whereas if you roll your tongue on your palate, you feel a nice smooth skin of your palate. I actually have a little seam where the doctors closed it when I was younger, and I actually feel a little seam there on my palate. So that's what it means. And some babies are born with just a palate, some babies were born with just a cleft lip, or sometimes there's both cleft lip and palate.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I sort of knew what it was, but I've never had that explanation before. So that was really helpful. And I think, knowledge is power. And I know, because we've obviously spoken a little bit before we sat down to do this, but you've had over 20 surgeries.
Yes, I have.
So how long into your life was that? Like, did they all happen when you were really little, like right around when you were born in very young years, or have you kind of had to keep going back throughout the years?
Mm-hmm. That's another great question. My first surgery is when I was about 2 or 3 months old, and that was the beginning just so I can at least be able to nurse, because when I was born, basically my whole airway from my palate to my nose was wide open, and I couldn't even nurse. Yeah. I was at risk of malnutrition. I wasn't able to swallow food because it was just come right out my nose. So that was the first surgery. I had a couple of months when I was a baby. I had when I was 6 years old, 8 years old, 12 years old, all the way until about 13. And then it took a little bit of a break. Again, when I was just before high school, I had a major surgery to remove some scar tissue and another one to repair my nose. That was right before high school. Very traumatic, because the doctors said, "Oh, we're going to make you look like a model." And I'm like, I don't want to be a model. I just want to be normal. And that was really difficult. And then it stopped through high school. And again, when I was in my late 20s, I had Actually, early 20s, I had another surgery to remove some scar tissue. And then my late 20s, I actually had another second bone graft because I needed dental implants. So that was another surgery I had. And that was the last surgery I had on my lip and my mouth and everything so far.
Okay. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, that's
just 20.
I lost count at 20.
Just for your, entire life and adolescence. I mean, that's got to be so difficult. We'll get to the social aspect of that, I imagine, but just from the mental load of constantly being in and out of a hospital, being in and out of surgeries, knowing that this was going to be your future. Like there wasn't necessarily an end in sight, I imagine, when you were growing up.
A lot of it was not knowing what was going on, not knowing why I needed all the surgeries, not knowing when they were going to end, what was really going on, the fear. A lot of it was also how I was raised. My parents, the way they were, my mother was not, she was emotionally absent and she was also not there for my surgeries. She would tend to believe, she tried to make me strong and independent. So she also had the belief that, well, you're a big girl. I'm going to drop you off at the hospital and I'll catch up with you later. I'm going to go have a cigarette or I'm going to go take care of your sister or I'll come back and be there when you wake up from the recovery room. But you don't need me to be there now. And so a lot of it was also, I was just on my own.
Yeah.
So it was very scary and not knowing what it was all about, what was going on, or why I needed all the surgeries.
Yeah.
I never really talked about my cleft lip growing up. It was just something that happened to me, something that I had. My mother's attitude was, well, be grateful you have 2 arms and 2 legs because there's children born without them. But that didn't make me feel better.
Yeah.
It was like, well, that doesn't help how I feel, which was, a monster and ashamed of how I looked because I was being bullied in school every day. And I had to have all these surgeries and not really know why. So it was very difficult.
Yeah. I can only imagine. But I think that's a really interesting perspective too, that it wasn't communicated to you what was even happening. And I think sometimes, especially, we're adults and I'm talking to you. I've never had the experience that you have. And I'm thinking with my adult brain saying like, well, I would understand what was happening to me in that I understand what a cleft lip is and that this is what needs to happen to get it fixed and yada, yada, whatever that is. But the gap in understanding, I think that's so interesting that was your experience and something that I don't think we talk about a lot when we talk about children going through, any sort of experience like that, medical experience, right?
Right.
So yeah, wow. Another layer to that, right?
Absolutely. The biggest thing is that as children, or me specifically, I knew I was different from other children. I knew I had to go to speech therapy. I knew I taught differently. I knew I needed doctor visits, surgeries, a lot of appointments for consultations, doctors looking in my mouth, dentist visits, braces. I knew all of that. I didn't know why. All I knew was I was born like this, and that's why I needed it. But I always felt like there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that it was okay to feel the way I did and that it was okay to feel the shame, but that it wasn't anything to be ashamed of. Because I didn't have a way to process that shame or even talk about it. It compounded and it got deeper and deeper. And then because I was bullied and there was never any understanding about it, and what made it worse was when I was 6 years old, I went to a Catholic school. I had to leave the Catholic school to go to public school because I needed speech therapy, and the Catholic school didn't have it and the scheduling. So that made me feel even more of an outcast. Like, oh, I couldn't go to the Catholic school. I had to go to a different school. What's wrong with me now?
Sure. It was always something.
Right.
Now, did you have siblings growing up? Okay. How many siblings do you have?
Yes, I had a younger sister. She's 4 years younger than me.
Okay.
And she does not have a cleft.
Okay. And were you close growing up?
Growing up, we were not close. We fought like cats and dogs. We used to tease and say that she was a country mouse and I was a city mouse as we got older. We were night and day difference. I was always the girly girl with trying to make up and the beauty, and she was the country girl with horses and the tomboyish. But we were not close emotionally either. And it's ironic because now as adults, we actually share a house together, and lived together for the last 10 years, and we're actually very close.
That's amazing.
If, any of your listeners have siblings and they were not close growing up, don't give up. There's always a chance to repair and be close to them.
I love that. Yeah, that's so cool. It's so hard, when you're growing up, and it can be a really volatile time sometimes, even if nothing's wrong, like just because you're growing up and it's hard. So yeah, that's awesome that you guys have found each other in adulthood and really connected and have that friendship. Do you think to an extent regarding like your family and the attitude towards what you were going through, do you think there was even a lack of understanding on their part, like on your parents' part? Or do you think it was just like I can't deal with this, I'm going to emotionally distance myself?
I think it was a little bit of both, and that was a lot that I did not understand or really know until I got much, much older. One of the stories that I've often heard that my father likes to tell was when I was born, the reaction from both my parents, the moment I was born. My father saw me when I was born, and he was in a complete panic. He was like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? How are we going to handle this? What's wrong? I don't know what to do. And my mother, always being the stoic, calm type, was like, well, just be happy that you have a healthy baby girl and she's alive, and we will figure something out and we will fix it. And the term "we will fix it" was both, for me now, a blessing and a curse, because it became like stigma for me. Well, fix it. I'm something broken that I'm to be fixed. And I actually took that on in almost a negative way, like, well, I'm broken and I need to be fixed. But it was also like, okay, I can be fixed. Lately, I started to see it in more of a positive way, like, I can overcome this. But I think it was also my mother's strength. Like, we're going to get through this. This is not the be-all, end-all. But she also, I think, was the strength and the rock of the family, where she distanced herself emotionally because she knew if she let herself feel those emotions, I don't think she would have been able to survive and make it through.
Yeah.
And she needed to be strong for my father, who was not quite as emotionally strong.
Yeah.
But it was also hard because growing up on my father's side, he believed in perfectionism. His father, or my paternal grandfather, had a really difficult time accepting me because I wasn't, quote, perfect. I, had the birth difference. And so that also made it difficult. Whenever I visited my paternal grandfather, I could feel that sort of animosity he had toward me because I looked different. He could never fully accept me. And that was also difficult. My father accepted me. He came around. He, realized that, okay, this is, who I was. My mother just stayed emotionally distant and was always like, okay, we're going to fix you. We're going to get you the best doctors. We're going to get you the best treatment we can. She was always my medical advocate, but never there for me emotionally like I needed or wanted it, even as a mother could. So that was also difficult.
Yeah. Again, so many layers, so much nuance to these conversations. It can never just be one thing.
Right, absolutely.
Right? This is what happened and this was the response and there it is. Like, there's so much happening all at once. And anytime you get more than one person involved, emotions are just there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's just part of being human. So socially, you mentioned a couple times that you had a really hard time in school growing up. You were bullied a lot. Was that your entire school experience?
Yes, that was from as early as I can remember. When I first started going to school, all the way through high school until I left high school and went to college. And even at times in college, it wasn't the same name-calling bullying in college and even in the workplace. It was a little bit more subtle, but it was still there. But the bullying was always there throughout. In elementary school, it was the name-calling. It was the finger-pointing. It was, the pushing, or just mostly the name-calling. And then in high school, it was the avoidance. It was just the teasing, or sometimes I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, so it was the pettiness. Oh, you're never going to meet a guy. Oh, no guy would want to date you. Oh, just go and put a paper bag over your head and then maybe you'll get kissed or something like that. And combined with just the general self-confidence of even meeting people and dating was just compounded. And then in the workplace, it was places like jobs not hiring me because of either how I talked or my speech or my appearance. So it was something that I've had to contend with my whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we don't even realize, and this is not a justification at all, but I think sometimes we don't even realize how powerful our reactions are, and we see something in somebody that's different, that makes them different, and we turn away from that, or even like subconsciously behave in a way that others them. And it's not okay. But I think we often don't realize that we're doing it. What would you say to people having been on the receiving end of it, especially in adulthood, right? Like, yeah, kids need to be taught not to bully other kids, but that's like very overt and obvious, right? In terms of how people react as adults, as somebody that has been on the receiving end of some of that, what would your advice be to somebody who is trying to be open and accepting, but doesn't necessarily know what to say or how to be accepting?
Right. Well, one of the things that I've learned is that, especially in adulthood, is that sometimes when they appear like they might be giving off those signs of, I don't want to say bullying, but fear or discriminating or kind of looking the other way, it's mostly their own fear. We fear what we don't know. And a lot of people are still unaware of what cleft lip and palate is.
Yeah.
And so if people see someone like me, they may not know what it is. They don't know what it came from and what it is. And they don't know how to approach me. They don't want to seem like they're staring. So they just do what they think is natural and look away so not to draw attention. And what I've learned is that at first I used to take that personally. Now I realize it's their own reaction. They don't know how to behave. So I give them that grace and I give them that kind of a pass. And I say, you know what? It's not personal. It's their lack of knowledge. And sometimes if I'm feeling super confident, if I think they might be open to it, I might approach them and I might just give a friendly smile or say hello. Sometimes I might just say, okay, you know what? They saw me and that's enough for them. At least they saw someone like me. And for those people that do see someone with a facial difference, it's not wrong to look and maybe give a smile in return and say hello, because we're just people like everyone else and we just want to belong.
Absolutely. I think it's incredible that you have that grace within you to give, because I'm sure that grace stockpile has been depleted over and over again throughout your life.
Yes, it wasn't always there. It wasn't until about 5 years ago when I really started the self-development and working on myself to build that grace and build that self-confidence. For the longest time, if I was out in public and someone looked at me and then looked away, or if someone was staring at me, I took it personally. I thought, okay, they're looking at me and yes, I'm a monster and I'm not going to go out in public again, or, par for the course. And I took it personally and I thought, that's just the way I am. Never going to meet anybody, never going to have friends. And it became my identity. And then with all the self-development work, that's when I realized it's not who I am. It doesn't define me, and it's just the outer shell, but what defines me is my actions and what I do and what I know, my skills, my knowledge, my behavior. And this is just an appearance, no different than someone of a different race or a different gender. But what defines them is what they do.
Absolutely.
And what they have, in their head and their heart. And that's what really defines any person.
Yeah, 100%. In school, did you have people that advocated for you at all? Did you have teachers or school administrators that kind of tried to put a stop to the bullying? Did you have friends, or were you kind of by yourself?
I was mostly by myself in school. I didn't really have teachers that advocated for me. They didn't really support me either. One instance that came to mind is when I was in high school, we had to take a language class. It was either French or Spanish. And I wanted to take French because I thought it was a beautiful sounding language.
Yeah.
I mean, not that there's anything wrong with Spanish. I know it's easy to understand and it's also very pretty, but just something about French was so romantic, and I'm a romantic at heart. And I remember my guidance counselor talked to me, and she talked to my mother, and she said, no, I really think Christine should take Spanish because it would be easier for her to learn and pronounce with her speech. And I felt so devastated to be blamed on my speech and not even given that chance to learn to take that language class because of my speech.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened when I was in junior high school, which is about 7th grade. I was in a band and I wanted to play the flute. And playing the flute was not possible because I couldn't purse my lips to play the flute. And I wanted to try anyway, and the band teacher just says, no, you can't play the flute at all. It's just not going to work. And, go find another instrument. And it was just so discouraging to be told that without even trying. And I've always been a fighter. I always said, at least let me try. And to be told and knocked down by teachers, and even those that I thought were supposed to be encouraging, was really discouraging in a way. As for friends, I didn't really have a lot of friends. I didn't make a lot of friends until I was in college, mostly because I was so withdrawn and within myself. I had a few friends through Girl Scouts. I was very active in Girl Scouts, and most of my friends were when I would go away to summer camp, either as a camper or when I got older, I actually worked in summer camp, and I made really great friends there when I worked there. But during the school year, not too many until I got in high school. I had a few friends, but even then it was a little precarious just because I didn't have self-confidence and I felt so insecure. I just really had a hard time making friends.
Yeah. It sounds like you've done a lot of work on yourself and where you are now. So knowing what you do now, do you wish you could go back and do it again?
Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. If I went back and I did it all again, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't be the person I am today and be able to educate and help others get over the obstacles that they're struggling with, that I struggled with.
Yeah.
I would be a completely different person, and I don't even know who I would be. So I always like to think of it as like, okay, this is the hand I was dealt, and this is what I made of it. And I'm very proud of who I became today because of what I overcame and what I've learned. And it wasn't easy, but I made it through, and I've learned so much from it, and I'm just grateful that I have that to give back now.
Yeah. You should be proud.
Thank you.
You went to college. What did you study in college?
I went to college and I studied business. I actually went to be a secretary or an administrative assistant. I always loved helping people, and I loved business. Growing up, and this is actually rather funny, I wanted to either be a nurse or a doctor, despite being deathly afraid of needles. And which sounds, 20 plus surgeries. I cannot stand the sight of a needle going into either an animal or a human. Even on TV, I cringe and I look away.
Okay.
But I still wanted to be a nurse or a doctor because I loved helping people. And I volunteered at the hospital for most of my high school years, which is nothing but needles. But I was terrible at math. So that ended the whole medical field. And then I worked as a secretary for a couple of years, got married, the whole thing. Eventually, my ex-husband, he had his own business. And somehow or other, I got involved in accounting. So I went back to school to get my bachelor's degree in accounting, and I became an accounting professor. Instead of going the route to get my CPA, I actually started teaching accounting, and I've had a great career teaching college accounting for over 10 years.
Wow.
Which, again, is kind of ironic, where I would teach accounting, give live lectures, and get up in front of the class, despite being ashamed of talking and everything. I love teaching. I love educating. And again, I loved helping. And I joke and I say, well, I did become a doctor because I eventually went back to school and I earned my PhD in business and accounting.
Yes, you did.
But yes, and so I made my dream to become a doctor.
Yes, you did.
But now I, again, made another life change to become a confidence coach because that's where my heart and my life is, my passion to help people with cleft lip and palate build their confidence and overcome the challenges of just living with a cleft lip and palate and feeling better about themselves.
Yeah. Wow. What you went through in your childhood and adolescence and even young adult, I'm assuming, years, as you said, is a big part of the reason you are who you are today. But you accomplished so much in the corporate world in your job. And you also have said that your self-development work has been somewhat recent in the past 5-ish years. So accomplishing what you did in the corporate world, did it give you this sense of satisfaction, like, I knew I could do it and I did it and I'm successful? Or did that acceptance with yourself come more recently with all of your work in self-development?
The self-acceptance really came recently when I divorced my ex-husband, when I earned my PhD, and when I realized that I am empowered and I have the confidence within me. That's when I really realized, okay, I can do this. And I was able to reflect back on what I did accomplish and what I went through. But more importantly, who I became and what I have to give back. When I was able to expose and express my vulnerability and say, okay, I can be my genuine, authentic self and I don't have to hide anymore. Because when I was working in the corporate world, I would use my skills and my talents to kind of compensate for what I perceived my imperfection in my appearance. So I always strove to be the best, which is why I went to get my doctorate. I figured that's the highest you can go in academia. It's, perfectionism. It's, no room for error. It's the best.
Yeah.
So what I realize now in all the self-development work is I don't have to be the best. I just have to do my own personal best. But that doesn't have to be the highest.
Right. That's a really important lesson to learn. And I think it takes all of us quite a bit of time to come to terms with that. I'm still working on that for sure. It can be really difficult to accept yourself where you are and know that what your best is at the moment is enough, and that if later on you become a different version of yourself that has more to give, that's great. But where you are right now matters, and that it's enough.
Absolutely.
So I love that. So it sounds like you got your PhD somewhat recently then.
Yes, I got it in 2018, I think it was.
Wow.
I don't remember, the years all blurred together. But yeah, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago I did get it, yes.
Okay. So really, that was the beginning of your upswing, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely, yes. I never thought of it that way, but yes, it was the beginning of my upswing. Yes, it was only a couple of years after I divorced my ex and not long after I moved to another city and I finished my PhD. And not long after that was actually the path where my mother passed away a couple of years later. And then that's what started me on my self-development to really build my own confidence and talk about my cleft lip.
Awesome. Yeah, divorce can definitely be a good avenue for self-acceptance.
Yes.
And I can speak from experience on that one as well. So, so I'm with you there. You're a coach, you said, which we'll get into that, but you work with Smile Train, which is a nonprofit.
Yes.
Yes. You explain what Smile Train is. That's probably better.
Yes. So Smile Train is a global nonprofit organization that provides medical support and actually medical training for doctors in foreign countries to perform cleft surgery. So basically, in countries like India, China, they train the doctors to carry out the cleft surgeries so that the residents there can get the help that they need for any of the babies or even adults born with a cleft lip and palate. Because, again, in those countries, they may not have the doctors that know how to do the surgeries. This way, they get that help rather than other missions or other organizations that fly in the doctors. By having the doctors that are trained, they always have that resource available.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yes.
So how do you work with them?
Great question. So my volunteer work with Smile Train is I work with their Cleft Community Advisory Committee, which aims to strengthen the global communications, strengthen the community within the U.S. and globally, and basically helps them with all of their communications throughout the world to make sure that they're on point, that they're targeted, and make sure that all the messages are coherent.
Yeah. I mean, I have very, very limited experience with cleft lip and palate. So my only real knowledge of the subject is from, I worked in Romania for years on a volunteer basis. And it's one of the things that makes children orphans in Romania. And I know in a lot of other countries because there's a lack of education around cleft lip and palate. From your perspective, is that solely a lack of education or is it also a lack of resources?
It's actually both a lack of education and resources, and it's also cultural. And unfortunately, still today, in many cultures, especially in China and in some cases in Africa and even other cultures, it's rooted in their culture that it's either the spirits at work. If a child is born with a cleft lip, it's sometimes it's believed that the mother has sex under a full moon. All of these myths that are not true. It's also the lack of education. Many times those communities are not aware that there are resources, that there's surgery that can repair the cleft, that the baby can go on to eat and live and breathe normally. It's also the fear of how they're going to get the surgery, how they're going to be able to pay for it. They don't have money. So it's how are they going to be able to do it? So yes, it is also resources. And it's also just the shame, especially in a country like China, some of these countries where you have a baby that's born with a cleft, there's the shame that comes to their community or that comes to their tribe, their tribal culture. About 2 years ago, I got to visit Kenya with Smile Train, and some of the people that we met and some of the babies that we met, we really learned about what it was like. One of the girls I met was a 16-year-old girl that grew up with a cleft lip and palate. Her first surgery wasn't done until she was about 14. Yes, I mean, her parents didn't even know that there was options available.
Yes.
And because she was born with a cleft lip, her whole family was immediately outcast from her community or her tribe. They lived in a remote clay hut on the top of a mountain, outcast, and the only way they heard about it was hearing about it on the radio. And they traveled hours by foot to get to the bus, to get to the hospital where they had the surgery done. And it was just amazing to hear and see the transformation, to talk to the girl, to hear her dreams, and to see how she is now after the surgery versus then. And to really learn how deeply rooted their culture is in their beliefs and their myths about what happens when a baby is born with this.
Yeah, I think it's so easy for us to sit here in built up American culture with resources at every turn at our fingertips, no matter what. Like, most of us have access to information, at least, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that there are definite disadvantages and things going on here that need to change majorly. But it's really hard for us to grasp, I think, in 2023 that people wouldn't know that there were resources available to them. But it's so true. It's so true that there is just a lack of knowledge sometimes of what is out there.
Yes. There's also a lack of knowledge on the medical community. And this is something that I just read about literally last week when I was doing some research. And ironically, since we're both in Florida, it was a woman in Palm Beach. And I will send you the news article when we're done. A woman in Palm Beach was actually found guilty of manslaughter when her newborn baby died from lack of nutrition because she was not able to feed the baby. The baby had a cleft lip and palate. She was not able to feed the baby. She couldn't get the baby to latch. And she was never given proper instructions or follow-up care about how to feed the baby with a nipple. Babies with cleft lip and palate need a special nipple if they cannot naturally nurse. And the doctor, when he sent the mother home, thought it wouldn't be a problem for the baby to nurse or use a regular nipple. So when I read that article, I was really upset, sad, and also angry that the doctor was not more knowledgeable, and knowing that he needed to follow up, he needed to make sure that the mother knew about the problems with feeding. I mean, of course, there's more to meet the eye, and there's always two sides to every story. I was just going by what the article said, but I've met so many doctors in my life and so many dentists, especially as an adult, who never met a patient with a cleft lip and palate.
Right.
And they didn't know how to treat, especially when they needed my dental implants. And so to read that article, I could understand that the doctor thought, okay, the baby can be able to nurse and latch normally or, drink from a nipple normally. And to hear that was just heartbreaking. And it reminded me of the lack of knowledge and the education that we need to continue to get out there.
Yeah. Well, geez, I mean, I take it all back. We all need this education, apparently. And really, like I said before, knowledge is power, right? Mm-hmm. So the more we know, the better off we are, especially when it comes to things that affect our neighbors and our community and things that can just help us be better neighbors and form stronger community. Mm-hmm. But wow, that is absolutely heartbreaking that in this day and age that can happen.
Yes.
So easily and just slip through the cracks.
Yes, absolutely. And when I was born, my mother, she was nervous and worried about me malnutrition because I wasn't able to get a lot of nutrition. And I know many mothers of children, babies with cleft lip and palate that also had the same issue with malnutrition. The other issue my mother had for me was choking because I couldn't swallow because my airway was still wide open. So the formula would go down my windpipe instead of down my throat to swallow. So there was also the issue that I would just choke on the formula. And so she had to make sure to feed me or have me sitting upright or have me sitting normally so that I wouldn't choke on the formula. So feeding a baby with a cleft is a little bit different. It's a little bit trickier. And of course, as a new mother, there's always the issue of learning to feed the baby just normally, and you have the added issue of feeding a baby with a cleft, it does need a lot of extra education.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point that having a baby, period, can be very difficult. You know, your first baby, no matter what, you're new to this. But add that on top of it, and it's just makes it more difficult, but also I imagine isolating, because unless you are aware of a community around you that is going through the same thing, what you're dealing with your new baby at home is completely different than, you know, what your neighbor down the street is dealing with.
Exactly. It's not like mothers of a baby with a cleft can just hop on any of the mommy blogs on Facebook and, you know, say, hey, you know, my baby won't drink. What can I do? Because they're not going to have the answers when the baby won't nurse because they can't latch on because they don't have the ability to suction. You know, I still have trouble drinking through a straw, and I can't blow up a balloon when most normal babies are going to have no trouble drinking through a bottle or latching onto my mother's nipples. So that is that added challenge. And there is also the definite isolation, whether it's a mother of a baby with a cleft or even an adult like myself with a cleft. The community is strong, but it's still very small, and we're still coming together. We're still growing.
Sure. Forgive my ignorance. How do you eat when your palate's not fixed? What is the function of that?
Well, I mean, to be totally honest, my palate was closed when I was very young.
Yeah.
So, but from what my mother told me, the way she did have to feed me, even until my palate was fully closed, is she would have to use a spoon and kind of not quite shove it down my throat, but angle it down so that it did pass. It didn't go up to the palate and out the nose, because formula would come out my nose if it did go through my palate. So she would have to kind of angle the spoon toward the back of my throat. The same thing with the bottle, angle it down toward the back of my throat. The same thing with anybody. I know that there are some adults that have palates still partially open. Just kind of have to make sure that when you eat the food, you angle it more toward the back of your throat. And even now, I have a small, what they call a fissure, a hole in my palate that sometimes food will get stuck in it, particularly popcorn kernels. One time I had a fish scale stuck in the hole in the seam of my palate. That was pretty painful until I got that out. Sometimes food will get stuck up there. And so there were times when I go swimming, the water sometimes comes out my nose. So that's because of the little hole in my palate. It's just kind of one of those things.
Yeah. The practicality of it, just dealing with it day to day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. So then going back to Smile Train and the education piece of it, is part of what they do focused on not just getting the resources out there, but also educating what resources are available in those areas or to the general public?
Yes, absolutely. So Smile Train is focused on educating the public, raising awareness. They work with the local hospitals and local medical communities. They also have outreach programs in those communities where staff would go into the really rural, remote areas to find children or adults with a cleft, to let them know that, hey, we have these medical resources available, bring them back to the bigger cities. So they focus on the education in those areas, and they also focus on the global education, working with both the U.S. market, the U.S. community, and those international communities around the world to help raise awareness and to help fund the research, to forward the research with the cleft lip and palate, and to help continue to raise awareness and the education around it.
Yeah, so important. So switching gears a little bit then into what you do, tell me how you got into your self-development work and then how that's led you to where you are now.
That's a really good question. So if you would have told me, let's just say 6 or 7 years ago, that I would be where I am today, you know, talking to you on a podcast about my cleft lip, having given a TED talk and being a coach, I would have said, you're in an alternate universe. I would have never believed you, because I could not have imagined myself. But what really was the one catalyst that started it all was my mother's passing. You know, we talked earlier on about my mother. She was my biggest medical advocate, but she wasn't there for me emotionally. And even though she wasn't there for me emotionally or as the mother I needed, she was the only person in the world who really knew what I went through. Even my sister, you know, even though we lived in the same house, she still never knew. She stayed home during my doctor appointments. She didn't often come to the hospital. So she knew, but she wasn't right there in the trenches with all the doctor appointments, with the dentist appointments. She wasn't there making me brush my teeth or, you know, making me wear the headgear or really, you know, fighting with the doctors like my mother was. So when my mother passed, it was like I lost a part of myself, and I lost the only person who knew what I had gone through. And that was, I felt that intense loneliness and that intense, like, okay, now what? You know, I felt like the only person in the world who had a cleft, even though I knew I wasn't alone, still felt that way. So I hopped on Facebook to look for, like, okay, you know, what's going on with cleft lip and palate? What advances are made? Is there a community? Is there something? It's 2000, I think it was like 18, 19. There's got to be something out there now. I found a Facebook group for cleft-affected adults, and it was only adults, because I knew there was a lot of resources for parents of babies with cleft. I had heard about Smile Train. They were focused on, you know, babies and their international work, but nothing for adults, and that kind of frustrated me. And then I found this Facebook group, and it was like, my people, my tribe, these are other adults with a cleft. They know what I've been through.
Yeah.
So I joined the group, and first I started as a lurker, afraid to post, afraid to say anything. And then slowly I started talking and posting, and I would share some experiences, and we would exchange it. And then I got more and more confident. About a year or two later, Smile Train asked for volunteers to serve on their Cleft Community Advisory Council. I said, you know what, I want to help. I want to give back. I was feeling a little bit more confident, and like I wanted to learn more and give back, and I joined. And it's kind of like a little baby step forward, one step at a time. And in working with them, continuing to interact with the community, I was going to therapy at the time. I'm still in therapy, working on myself, building my own self-confidence, talking more about my cleft, and realizing how that made me who I am today. And it was an integral part of me. I couldn't deny it. I said, you know what? I said, there was a need to help other adults, overcome the challenges that I did, you know, to get through those social issues. So that's when I decided to kind of give back and become a confidence coach to help those adults learn to overcome the social anxiety and improve their self-worth and improve their self-acceptance.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So what does it look like to coach someone who has been through a similar experience to you? What path do you take them?
That's a great question. Well, first, I usually start off talking to the person, finding out what their goals are and what they're struggling with most. I mean, even though we all have similar struggles within those of us that have a cleft lip and palate, and even those that don't have a facial difference, we still struggle with self-confidence, self-worth, self-acceptance, body issues. And I showed up by finding out what's your main struggle and what do they want to change most. Whether it is just feeling better when they look in the mirror, or maybe having the confidence to go out and make friends, or maybe it's just feeling better to go out and get that job and pursue their goals. So we find out what they want to change most.
Yeah.
From there, we work on addressing it by either setting boundaries, which helps to build confidence, or finding their values, or just finding their own worth and chipping away at that and just improving that by helping them take little baby steps. When I coach somebody, it's usually a 3-month process. A little bit at a time. We might meet once a week, might meet twice a week. I don't like to set a time frame because it depends on, usually we go by number of sessions and how often we meet, and again, how we're moving toward the goals. And we always meet together to make sure that we're working on the same page. It's a very collaborative process to make sure that we adjust as we go. Are we meeting those goals? Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? Have the goals shifted?
Yeah.
Are we still aligned with them?
Yeah. I am a firm believer in your life experience is your greatest teacher. It's the thing you know the most about. So when you talk about being an expert in something, anything you've personally experienced, I feel like you should be able to call yourself an expert in it because you physically walked through it. You know, maybe you haven't read a book on it, but you could write a book on it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
So what's next for you? What plans do you have? What dreams do you have?
My next goals and dreams is I want to continue to build the cleft community. I would love to continue to strengthen it, to embrace it, to have it become together. My ideal is to have a nice, big, robust U.S. cleft community online where we get together, we meet socially online, we communicate, we chat, we have these little, weekly sessions. We exchange ideas. We support each other. We talk about who's having another surgery, what challenges we're facing, who's got a new job, who's struggling to get a new job, who's facing, maybe challenges dating or who's getting married. The biggest thing in the community, our little Facebook groups that we're in, is when someone gets married, it's for someone like us, and even when I did first get married, even though it didn't end well, the feeling of getting married when you think nobody's ever going to love you enough to marry you is so... for anybody getting married, it's exciting. It's like, okay, yes, I've met the person of my dreams. But for someone with a facial difference, it's like beyond a Disney fairy tale story. It's like, who would have ever thought it would have happened? And I'm just thinking that there was a couple of posts recently of people getting married who shared that same sentiment, and I think the same thing. So I'd love to hear those stories, and I want to continue to hear more of those and continue to strengthen the community. I also want to continue to educate. It is my goal that society become as aware of cleft lip and palate as they are about Down syndrome. Statistically speaking, cleft lip and palate happens to 1 in 700 children worldwide. That's the same incidence as Down syndrome.
Wow.
Yet everybody in society pretty much knows about Down syndrome. If you ask even young children or adults, what is a characteristic of Down syndrome, or if they can identify someone with Down syndrome, they can. But if you ask them cleft lip and palate, or they can see someone and identify it, probably a little bit harder for them to do. So my ultimate goal, I would love to have society be as aware of it as they are of Down syndrome, so that we can remove that stigma and just have everybody be as comfortable and accepting of it.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you.
It's a great goal. Based on either your experience or your experience with clients or both, what are some things that you would want people to know specifically about cleft lip and palate? If you could only leave people with a few tidbits.
It's a lifelong journey. It's not just a one-and-done surgery, as most people think. It's not, just because you see that my lip looks somewhat normal despite the scars, and I talk normally and I can eat and drink normally, doesn't mean my journey is over. I've had implants when I was in my late 20s. I'm probably going to need another round of dental work in the future if something happens to these implants. I know some friends of mine that are older than me that have to go through another round of surgery. Their implants are failing. People in their 60s that need surgery. So it's a lifelong journey of medical treatments, because our mouths are always shifting, and everything is always shifting. So it's not just a one and done, and it's always a challenge psychologically and socially. We're always fighting that stigma. We're always fighting ourselves. Despite all of the work that I've done on myself, I'll be honest and vulnerable, I still have days where I feel that shame. To be totally honest, I still teach part-time, and last week I got an evaluation from one of my students that said I couldn't do my work because I couldn't understand her. Despite my having a written transcript, despite you hearing me fine now, the student still used that as an excuse. And that hit me hard. It cut me to the core, and it sent me back a little bit, and it kind of knocked the wind out of me, and it was like, it triggered me back to my childhood.
Yeah.
It took me a little while to recover from, and to realize, like, okay, I'm not 6 years old again. I'm not that little girl in school being teased and having to hide out in the bathroom. And it was hard, and it made me mad. And if I wasn't as strong as I am, and if I allowed it to, it would have taken me down. And that's what I want people to know, that it's not as easy as it was, and we are a lot stronger than it seems. So don't be afraid of us.
Yeah.
I guess I don't want to say respect our strength, but
yes, respect your strength.
Respect our strength.
100%.
Hashtag cleft strong and cleft proud.
Yes. No notes. Seriously. What you have walked through, and not once, like you said, and I will confess to being ignorant that it is more than one surgery. I've seen it's usually infants, and okay, they had a surgery now, that's it. Yeah, they have a facial difference, but the surgery's done. And that's just not the case.
Right.
And so that's my own lack of knowledge, which is my responsibility, right? That's my responsibility.
Right.
So I think, just because somebody's wounds look like they're healed doesn't mean they're incapable of opening again. And we need to be careful that we're not the ones holding the knife.
Exactly. That's a beautiful way of putting it, yes. And to just touch on what you said about the babies having that surgery and looking like it's one and done, medical technology has come so far today that most of the time when the babies do have the surgery to close their lip, they don't need additional surgeries to remove excess scar tissue because they can do a good enough job. But what's not seen is what's underneath. As their jaw grows, as their teeth grow in, their jaws could be misaligned. They might need further surgery to reshape their nose, clear their airways. Sometimes there's a pharyngeal flap, which is that little part that's in the back of your throat that needs to be reshaped. And so I've talked to many mothers where their babies need multiple surgeries, not necessarily that are visible, especially as they get older. I thought sometimes I've had a lot of 20 surgeries. I found out that there was a father of a boy with a cleft. He had 36 surgeries. And I was like, okay, I don't want to say you win, but wow, I bow down to you at 36 surgeries.
Wow.
So, but a lot of it is also, yes, society takes responsibility for education, but it's also the information needs to be out there for you to learn. And, that's why I'm doing this podcast. And also, and again, this is very timely, if you go on my Facebook page, and depending upon when this podcast comes out, you'll see it. A couple of months ago, a mother posted a baby picture of her son. It popped up in her memories. He has a cleft lip. Facebook pulled it, and they cited it was offensive and did not meet their guidelines.
Wow.
And she was heartbroken, and I got a screenshot of it when she posted that, and she reposted it, and I posted a blog post about Facebook pulling that picture. And it's the things like that either somebody reported that picture as offensive of her baby with his cleft lip before it was operated on. I mean, who would find the picture of a baby with a cleft offensive? Cute little baby. So it's things like that also need to be, help raise awareness and educate society.
Yeah, and something that seems so inconsequential in passing, but would really have an effect on somebody
Yes.
who has an emotional attachment to that, as it should.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, the question that I ask everybody on this show is, through the lens of your experience, what does it mean to you to be compassionate?
Oh, wow. It means to be fair and to give of yourself in an understanding and caring manner. To be non-judgmental and to be understanding to what someone else is going through, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And to give of yourself in any way that you can while still taking care of yourself, not overextending, not, extending your boundaries, but just giving what you can of yourself to help them out and just being heartfelt.
Yeah. Hey. If we could all do a little bit of that,
absolutely,
we would be way better off.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely post links in the show notes to you and how to get in touch with you as well. And yeah, I'm excited for you and what's next. You're doing great things. You have a beautiful smile, by the way.
Thank you so much.
And I'm so glad to have met you in person and to be able to talk to you and hear your story. And I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you for this opportunity. It was wonderful to meet you too.
Thank you so much for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with others, and leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours, so be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and take care.